Once that loads, you will land here, and by default you have the Zoom In tool activated. Click, hold, drag, release a box around somewhere in the United States, and that will zoom in on the selected area. Continue zooming in until you can see the property of interest. Once you've zoomed in, if you need to move around, this hand tool or pan tool, click, hold, drag, moves the map. From there, you can define your area of interest using a rectangle or a polygon of irregular shape. Let's try the rectangle. Click, hold, drag, release a box, selecting the AOI, area of interest, which will be reflected in this teal hash-marked area. So that is the area for which we will retrieve the soils data. Soils data can be accessed online here through the soils map. See here we have a legend here saying what each of these three-letter codes mean. So here we have THD, Thorndike, with a, 15 to 25% slope. Clicking on that will bring up the associated record. Thorndike is a typical spotosol soil. It has a 0 to 3 inch layer organic material, followed by an E horizon, which has all of its organic matter and lots of its nutrients stripped out by the acidity of this decomposing organic material, and then a B horizon beneath that, where the washed out stuff arrives. That is the zone of eluviation and the zone of iluviation, where the nutrients and decomposed organic material are deposited. After that, the shovel makes an interesting noise as you hit bedrock. Let's take a look at some of the other soils here. So there is NCB. Let's see what that is. I don't recall what that one stands for. NCB, Nickelville. And that is what our red pine plantation is growing on for the most part. And that is an old lake bed. Neat. So coarse silty glacial lacustrine, that means a glacial lake, deposits derived from siltstone. So silt loam, and loam. Quick reminder that loam means an equal representation of the properties of sand, silt, and clay, and a silt loam is a little heavier towards silt, and that's what we have on the upper horizons of this Nicholson, but on the lower horizons just plain loam, which is actually kind of unusual to see. It's a thing you often see listed on Craigslist, but very rarely actually see in real life. In any case, that's suggesting to me that my little chestnut plantation there is planted in an old glacial lake bed, which is very cool. Uphill of that, we have the SGC, Stetson, with moderate slope. Let's close that. That's a much more common thing to find. And that is gravelly loam over gravelly sandy loam over stratified very gravelly coarse sand to sand. And that glaciofluvial means glacial stream, so eskers are remains of old glacial streams and outwash plains rather than just a single individual stream. It's flowing out over a wider area. So that's of course associated with our glacial lake. So here we have gravelly loam, and gravelly refers to particles too big to call sand and that doesn't show up on the soil triangle. But we also have gravelly sandy loam and stratified gravelly coarse sand to sand. So going back to our triangle, we're going from loam to sandy loam to eventually sand. And throughout all about here, I've planted on a 10 by 10 spacing American chestnut, and I can tell you it is tremendously variable from one tree to the next. Every hole I dug was just a touch different. So this is not one big homogeneous lump of the same soil. You take 2 steps to the left, you find more rock. You find less rock. You find a slightly deeper hole, shallower hole, easier digging, harder digging. Soils are tremendously variable. They're fascinating. But this is mapped at a certain scale, which is useful. But that scale does not suggest there's not any kind of an inclusion in here, which could be just a little bit different. So now I have just a little bit of information about this Nickelville, and I want to know a lot more about it. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to copy and paste this Nickelville silt loam, copy, into the Google paste, and official series description. And that's going to take me to the USDA Soil Service, where I have all kinds of extra information about what Nickelville looks like, where we expect to find it, and what it's often used for. What's interesting here, most areas have been cleared and are used for growing hay, corn, small grain, and vegetable crops. This area used to be a potato field. In the 1970s, it was converted over to a woodlot with red pine. And the reason for that was it's just a little too irregular for the larger equipment they were moving to with mechanized farming and potatoes. They like the bigger fields that are more flat, and it was just no longer economically productive. So they planted red pine with support from the Soil Conservation Service, and this is particularly interesting to me because we have a bunch of red oak growing in on its own. I've planted a bit in there, but most of what's in there is not what I planted. So I've sort of filled in areas I would like to have red oak, but we have a lot of squirrels and blue jays and stuff dropping off acorns from the trees over on Pleasant Street, and those have just been taking off, and we have a touch of white pine getting in there as well. But that history of farming means that these top layers are going to be all mixed together. They've been plowed many, many times, and you're not going to find all of these things exactly in the order that they're suggested to be here. And after 50 years of growing red pine, it may be somewhat more than moderately acid. Back to our web soil survey. Someday you will be downloading soils data. That someday will come in about a month. And you have to ask it to. So create download link. And once that finishes loading, you'll have a download link created here. And you'll just click on that. It'll download a zip file. And when we get to that point, I will teach you how to do it.